time for the first keynote address. And that is from Brightness Mangolothi, all the way from South Africa. We're very excited to have her here. Brightness is a director at Higher Education Resource Service, South Africa, a higher education women's leadership development NGO. She is a former lecturer, postgraduate supervisor at public and private universities, head of department at Nelson Mandela University, and head of program at IEE at VET. Brightness is a co-editor of a book titled Women's Empowerment for a Sustainable Future, Transcultural and Positive Psychological Perspectives. She's also an equity and inclusion advocate for Black people and an award winner. Brightness has served on various boards and leadership roles in and outside academia. Shall we please give a warm welcome, Brightness?
Okay, I always have some conflict with Brightness. I see this brightness around me, and I'm Brightness. But with that said, thank you very much for the warm welcome and for the introduction. And it's also a pleasure. It's also a pleasure having listened to you, VC, a thought-provoking presentation. Thank you very much. And I think the Dean also echoed something that I want to echo in my presentation. There's an echo. Is there something that's supposed to be off that is on? So I can actually hear my voice coming back. Okay, with that said, thank you very much. And I want to say thank you to my colleague Benedict for this great initiative. And I said to her yesterday, 7 is a very strategic number. It's about completion. But beyond completion, it's basically about saying, solidifying the foundation of what you have done. I want to do an exercise, which is basically from where I come from in South Africa. When we greet, we say sawubona. And we say sawubona. Okay? Let's go back to the greeting. And I love a vibrant audience, and I want to see vibrant. I want to see you engaging. So what does sawubona mean? Sawubona say, the bona that actually say, I see you. Did you get that? So when we greet as Africans, we don't greet as just saying hello or how are you. It's a space of acknowledgement. To say, I see you. In this particular conference, we talk about the BME, and we know we are invisible. We are erased. Our voices are silenced. So in the Zulu culture, when we say, sawubona, that says, I see you, I acknowledge you. And also, as one response to sawubona, others can also respond by saying sawubona back. Okay, let's do it the right way. Let's do it the right way. Just greet someone intentionally. Don't just sawubona, see the person. So with that said, I just want to say sawubona. Thank you very much. I see you, I acknowledge you, I appreciate you. And as I stand here, I might be standing as one, but I come as 10,000. I bring greetings from Africa. I bring greetings from my board. And I also want to acknowledge especially the chairperson of HERS SA, Dr. Soraya Bukas, who has actually given me an opportunity to come here to say Brightness, go and speak to the nations because we want our voice to be heard. I thought to myself, as I was pondering about how do I go about articulating or bringing the theme to life, building communities of influence. And I love part of your introduction, VC. You said, as part of the introduction in the program, this is already a community. I hope you get grasp of that. This conference, it's already a community. Get that? And then I thought, coming from Africa, maybe it will be appropriate to say, let's build communities of influence using the Ubuntu lens. And that's what we talk about, the indigenous knowledge. When I refer back to Crenshaw, she also talks about whose knowledge matters. And also it's about voices. So many voices have been erased. Not that they are not competent, not that they are not bringing anything relevant, but it's not what they are bringing. It's about who they are. With that said, I thought the introduction, that is my agenda, positionality just to bring into the space of who I am. I know the profile that has been provided, and also the point of reference. Now here in UK, you talk about ED, the equity, diversity, and inclusion. In South Africa, we talk about the DABE, which is the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Because we argue to be included, it's nothing. To be at the table, it's nothing. But do you feel that you belong? Do you feel that's your bona? Do you feel seen? Do you feel that you're part? And then centering transformation in higher education in the attainment of the sustainability development goals. And that echoes what you said, VC, to actually say we have 17 goals. But I want to echo that those 17 goals cannot be attained. And the Dean actually says, from the people with disability, they say nothing about us without us. And I'll articulate more. What do I mean by that? And then the transformation from the day perspective, but importantly now bringing back to the theme to say, let's look at the Ubuntu lens. And then I'll also do my closing remarks. I just want to echo as part of my introduction that being in a space of higher education, networks are key to one's success in academia. It's not a one-man show. And it's very important, especially from the BMEs. We talk about diversity in university, but the question is, do you see yourself within the spaces that you are working in? And some of these things we just assume because we have created equity, because we have brought someone who's Black, because we have brought someone who has a disability. But do they have someone they can see, that they can connect with? The need for formal and informal support cannot be overemphasized for Black minority groups. Thus, building communities is critical for micro and macro level influence. And I intentionally say macro and micro and macro. One can actually talk about the micro, the meso, the exo, and the macrosphere, because the argument is that as you are engaging, it's not about changing the I. It's not about the micro level. If we are going to continue fixing people and not fixing the system, we'll be dancing in the same mud. There are three things that I want to focus on or argue. One, to be able to go forward, we need to know where we have been. And we are reminded that we are not ahistorical. Some of the experiences that we are talking about at this particular juncture are driven and are informed by our past. And then secondly, too, transformation in our universities is, and I'm making a claim, and it's not always the case, is interconnected with sustainable development goal. And I see when people talk about the SDGs, like the SDG there, transformation there. Remember, transformation is not just about changing faces. It's about changing systems. It's about changing processes. And also the last one, I want to argue the case of building communities using the Ubuntu lens. So this is my story, part of my positionality. As you can all see, I'm Black. I'm a woman. I come from the working class. So those are some of my intersecting identities. When I entered the space of higher education, I was very young. And being young, and that's what universities do. You are the bright scholar, a bright student, you are doing excellent, and we think, you know what? This is our star. Let's bring this particular person into the system. But the reality is that the star remains a student. Does that make sense? It might be they see you as a colleague, or they tell you you are a colleague, but because the professor has been a professor, you remain submissive to the professor because they have created a space for you. The school space, very interesting school space that I was in. For some who are also orientated into the context of South Africa, I studied at Morris Isaacson, and that's where the June 1976 riots actually started, where people said, enough with an education that is not inclusive. So that's where I'm grounded, where people were radical, where we were taught about our rights, where we were taught that we are able, we are possible, we are the future. And then with that said, as I was told, and also there's a spiritual orientation that is not coming out from what I've provided as part of my positionality. Because religion is very key, especially for the BME. It's a space where we connect, it's a community. It's also our coping space. It's also our healing space. It's a space also where we learn. And it is in that space that I had mentors. It is in that space where I met people who showed me that there is something called a university. Purely because also I was the first graduate in my family. There's also some unintended effect of being the first. So there's a lot of baggage that you are carrying. And then I always talk about the double-edged sword. On the other side, everyone say brightness is doing all the bright things. On the other side, there are things that are happening in the workspace that are making me to feel uncomfortable, but I don't have anyone to talk to. And then I got into the academic space. I was also young when I got into the academic space. I was one of the brilliant students, not to be quoted. And with that said, I got into the system when the system was being transformed. They said we wanted to have equity candidates. But what happened as they attracted equity candidates, they were not providing the support. It's just like they were plugging us into the system and they say, you have to figure out how to actually find your way within the system. And it's not always easy. Remember some of the things that you have to fight in meetings, some of the things that you have to disagree upon. You have to also recognize and recall, this is my former lecturer. If not my former lecturer, it's my current supervisor or leader. If not my current supervisor, as in the research perspective, is someone who is heading the department. So somewhere along the line, our voices are silenced. So you want to speak up, but you're thinking, if I speak up, what's going to happen to my PhD? If I speak up, What's going to happen to the fact that I'm not appointed full-time? So you are dancing on eggs. So you have to be cautious on how do I do my movement so that I survive into this system. And then you have the marketing and communication department that actually say, we call it hypervisibility. We have these BME candidates in our institution. You move into a leadership space. My PhD, it's on women's experiences of bullying in higher education. And I can tell you stories. The one story that I want to tell you is that going through the process of getting ethical clearance was not an easy one. And also being told, but brightness, this is not our niche area. So you're being told silence directly, indirectly on what you want to do research on. So at some point you are channeled to do things because the system says this is what needs to be done. But the question, how can we make the change if we continue to do the same things? Beyond getting ethical clearance, I got a shock of my life as I was doing interviews. Part of the ethical clearance I needed to get counseling people on standby to ensure that if anything goes wrong, there's someone who's supposed to provide the counseling. But I remember 2 or 3 of the interviews that I conducted, I had to say, can we pause? Because I felt like I needed to get counseling. And also, as I was doing the planning, the whole planning of collecting the data because I did interviews, I was very optimistic because I thought, no, I'll do 3 interviews. I had 3 universities where I did studies from, I collected data from. And I thought I'll go to the first university, I do my first 7, I go to the other, do another 7 and so forth. And I realized that uprightness. The baggage that people are carrying is not something that you can articulate in just 1, 2, 3 days and you think you can reduce it on paper. I had to actually ensure that every session I sit with my supervisor and reflect and make sense and journal my experiences. One of the papers that is coming out, it's actually a reflection of me doing a sensitive study. But here's a catch. Beyond being an academic and also getting into leadership, you suddenly realize when we talk about microaggression, when we talk about power relations, or when we talk about workplace bullying, we assume this conversation about those that we are leading that are being bullied. But when you talk about the BMEs, they are bullied by those that they are leading. And how do you deal with that? Because here you are, you don't fit into what we call as a leader. And here you are, now you have to go back and report that I'm being bullied by my staff. What does that say? You're not competent. That means you're not competent enough to actually manage your own staff. And hence issues of mental illnesses are very present in the space of higher education. People are slowly dying inside. People are dying in silence. But let's move on. I moved out of higher education when I realized that I've done my change, I've done my impact, and I needed to do more impact. And this is where I found myself currently working for HESA, which is an organization that develops women leaders in higher education, because we want to drive the agenda of gender transformation. But as we drive the agenda of gender transformation with a focus of just women, bearing in mind that gender is more than women. Talk about LGBTQ, and. But our focus is on women. But what is very important is that we cannot universalize women. and assume that because they are women, they have same experiences. But because of their intersecting identities, the experiences are totally different. Let me move. Let's go to the future, which is basically the past. I don't know what happened there. So the slides moved. But what I've just shared with you, it's basically a reflection of what is articulated also inside the ivory towers. One of the editor, Professor Shelley N. Tate, who has also moved in UK and now based in Canada, met her with Ade in South Africa. I was looking forward to meeting him. And these are the realities. In fact, I came up with a model as part of one of the papers that I've written for my PhD to actually say, when we talk about the BME, from the first day you stepped into the university, you are not welcomed. You are not welcome. And that also means when you have to, as an academic, when you need to get files, documents for you to do what needs to be done, and suddenly it's missing in action. When they're training development, sometimes it's like a dangling carrot. You are told you have an opportunity to attend training. You get excited for once you are nominated, but at the 11th hour, there's something that is very urgent that you need to attend. And that actually means you cannot attend that training. But remember, when you tick the box, they'd say, Brightness has been nominated to attend the training. So it's more a case of psychology happening in our space. And I also wanted to share this book from South Africa. I wish I can just work on, but it's okay. Black Academic Voices are South African experiences. It articulates the same experiences. What is happening in UK, it's also happening in South Africa. But the interesting thing in South Africa, the BME are the majorities. The UK, it's the inverse. But you find in the spaces such as higher education, the BME are the minorities. So with that, I wanted to articulate the issue of transformation, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And it's unfortunate that you cannot see it. Can I move out? I'm not sure what happened. We try to deal with it. And for me, this is where the crux is at. There's a circle that is missing, that is supposed to give us . I see there's a lot of movement that happened here. Anyway, we continue. The point about belonging in a spaces that we find ourselves in is that, do you feel welcomed? Do you feel supported? Do you feel that you have someone to talk to when you have a problem? Do you feel that you are part? When decisions are made, do you feel that you are part of the decision makers? Or do you feel silence? I know of a number of situations, and this also comes out from my research findings, is that technically you are silenced, You raise some key critical issues in meetings. And as you raise those issues, you are erased intentionally. The second person says the same thing that you have said. And suddenly it becomes gospel truth. And why is that the case? So it's not about the what you are saying. It's about the who is saying. So I hope that gives you a picture and informs this journey that we are taking into building communities of influence. Now I want to come to this slide on the 17 Sustainability Development Goals. And I want to also borrow from the Organization of Disabled People that says, nothing about us without us. And I want to ask some questions. Who is affected by poverty, hunger, issues of health, issues of well-being? If I can have some input, who is affected by these issues? Is it everyone? Not really. Talk to me. What's your really? Some of us. The point that I want to drive home is that there are three pillars that university looks into. It's teaching and learning, it's research, it's community engagement. The question is, what are we teaching? What are we researching? Who are we engaging with? So with those three pillars in mind, are those that are doing these three representative of the population of the country? Is it a question that certain voices are silenced and other voices are dominating? And I want to go back, nothing about us without us. If I have a problem as a Black person, the best person to solve that problem is a Black person. That's the message that I want to convey home. But let's come back to these 17 goals. Research has been done. Yes, there have been changes that influence innovation, changes that we're experiencing in the world. The first part, in fact, when you look at the 17 goals, they use what they call the 5 pillars, the people. So the no poverty, the zero hunger, the good health, the quality education, the gender equality, it's about people. Remember, gender equality also, it's about the minority group, that is women. And then also, at the core of what we're trying to achieve as higher education, and also in this conversation that we are having, it's about prosperity. It's one thing when we talk about access, diversifying our university. It's another when we talk about success. So are you feeling that you belong? And in that belonging, do you feel that you can succeed, you can thrive? Not because of your race, not because of your gender, but because of the equal opportunities that are presented to all of you. But again, is it fair to treat unequal people equal? And I'm not expecting an answer from that. The core that I want to bring home also, when you look at 16, it's about peace. What is currently being experienced in higher education? The violence. Remember, violence does not have to be physical. The psychological violence, issues of microaggression, it's the violence. But it takes us to the pillar number 17, which is about participation. I want you to actually begin to think, as you think about your communities, and say, how do we begin to tap into these 17 goals? How how do we contribute on this as the BME? And quite frankly, openly, I can actually say there's a lot of money that is dedicated to research on the SDGs. But people haven't actually figured out how to fit in. And the best way as the BME to have voice is to actually articulate these 17 goals. And the last one is about partnership. And this is where the core of the presentation is about. The themes of the conference, let's go back to the previous conferences. The first conference, Bme actually said, it was about be positive, practical, pragmatic, feel empowered to stay in academia. What does that focus on? On an individual. The second one says, how to stay in academia. And also now it's moving away from an individual, which also intersect between the individual and the group and the organization. To say, how do I begin to understand the politics of the institution? How do I begin to understand the opportunities that exist within the institution? So it's now looking at transforming the system, not just from the eye, but from an organizational level and also from a group level. The same with the third conference. And then the fourth also, looking at an organizational level that says, how do we begin to navigate the academic space? How do you begin to navigate the academic space where you don't see people who look like you? And take that into our conference theme today, which is building communities of influence. And the sixth conference spoke about making the invisible visible. And I've echoed that most of us feel, we don't feel, we're actually invisible. I laughed at some point, one of the professors said, but there are a lot of Black people in this university. I don't understand why people say there's no transformation. And I remember responding and saying, I agree with what you're saying, because from your lens, you are used to seeing 2. Now you are seeing 10. That's transformation. I don't know what happened to the screen. Okay. The point that it's okay. The point that I want to drive home is as we engage in this community, we need to appreciate that there are intersecting systems that influence our success within this sector that is in higher education. If you begin to look at the individual, which is the I, the social identities and how these social identities intersect. In fact, Crenshaw put it so nicely to say oppression is basically structural. It's about system. It starts from the micro level to the macro level. It's about racism. It's about sexism. It's about all the isms that we can talk about. At the micro level, it's about the interpersonal, the didactic, the engagement. When you engage with your colleagues, do you feel that you are part? And the feeling that you are part, does it make you to want to stay in academia? You feel that you have someone that you can confide to? Can you even trust yourself? Now, I always say, in most cases, we have to assimilate as BME. We need, when you enter the gate of the university, you literally have to lose your identity so that you can be able to fit in. And that's the only way that you can sustain yourself. But it's unsustainable. It's like having multi-personalities. Every time when you have to do something, you have to be cautious of what you're saying and how you are saying it. And then coming to the close, with that said, I just want to say that is the core of the reason why we need to build these communities. The communities that are going to make us feel that we belong. And I thought maybe let me get into the etymology of these three words, the building, the community, and the influence. The building is about constructing a house. And let's take it to the next level. It's not just a house. We know that there's a difference between a house, which is the building, the structure, the four walls, and a home. So when we build these communities, we build a family. We are building a home. We are building a space where we feel somebody cares, somebody loves me, somebody supports me. And the second one, which is about communities, it's derived from the Latin word, which actually says it's about common, it's about public, it's about shared. So it's about shared commonalities. Why are we doing this? It's about the purpose. As the BME, what is it that we want to achieve? And then lastly, it's about influence. And the influence in English, it's about fluidly formally believed to flow from star to star, which is about the cause. The influence is about the impact. What is it that we want to impact? And then from that diagram that we saw in my previous slide, that is about intersectionality. Intersectionality, you have to ask yourself, how do we begin to influence the I, the group, the organization, and also at the macro level? And I want to bring home the concept or the philosophy of Ubuntu. When we build these communities, there's a nice adage, African adage, that actually say, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And that is the essence, the core of a community. It's about working together. Ubuntu is a good Nguni term that means humanity. Ubuntu, you feel human. Unfortunately, the spaces that we find ourselves in are dehumanizing. So at the heart of the Ubuntu, it's about how do we begin to humanize our spaces. It's about collectives, it's about collaboration. And very interestingly, Audrey Tang suggests that Ubuntu implies that everyone has a different skill and strength. People are not isolated, and through mutual support, they can help each other. In summary, it actually says, we all have something that we can contribute. We all have something that we can bring into the table. You can never say, I'm a young scholar, I'm new in this space. And then lastly, when we create these spaces, these communities, it is important that we define the purpose. Why are we creating this community? I think our colleague who initiated this conference was able to say, I want to drive change when it comes to BME. So when we start to begin to build this community outside this conference, so that it can have more meaning and more impact, we need to understand and define the purpose. We need to now start and saying, who do we want to be members of this community that we are starting? Is it going to be formal or informal? What are the communication structures that we need to put into place? What are also the priorities that we need to look into? Because at some point we have a list of problems. But what are the key 3 things that we want to achieve, maybe within the term of 2 years? And importantly, we need to say, as we build these communities, is it about the relationship? Are we bringing the university into this space? Or is it outside the university? Are we also saying we need to formalize it in such a way that it informs decisions within the university? And the better when it's in the university, because that actually means it can also be funded. That actually means you can also be part of the strategic spaces that makes decision within higher education. And then basically the principles of forming these spaces, it's about justice, it's about responsibility, it's about equality, collectiveness, relatedness, reciprocity, and then it's about love, it's about respect, helpfulness, community caring, someone that I can depend on. It's about sharing, it's about trust, it's about unselfishness. But importantly, as we talk about influence, it's about social change. And to come to a close, I just want to reflect on my organization. This is HES SA. The purpose is advancing gender transformation in higher education. And what we do, we create a space for network. We help those who are in that space to begin to think about the career plan. I know of many people, especially BME, who don't even know what do you need to be a professor. It is Stephen Covey that say, begin with the end in mind. If you know what is required of a professor, you can actually begin to plan on how do I become a professor. It's about capacity development. It's about sharing resources. How often do you get information that is useful but not relevant to you? But if you have a community, you begin to share this information that will be benefit from that information. It's about sharing opportunities. It's about collaboration. And this collaboration should not just be limited within the higher education space. And they should not just be limited in the UK. And I'm coming here also to say, I want to collaborate with you. I want us to have an engagement where we have UK and South Africa. And as South African HES SA, we're not only offering our services to South Africans, we have people as far as the tip of Africa to the top of Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, you name it. But importantly, so many of us are achieving within our space, but no one is recognizing or celebrating. So these spaces are aimed also to celebrate, but importantly to create a safe space to be seen and heard, and importantly, advocating change. And then to come to a close, without fundamental changes, universities will lose their central role in the creation of knowledge and research. And communities are critical to the attainment of the SDG. Thank you very much.
Wow. I can only say wow. We've got 15 minutes for Q&A, and we've got the mics here for our online audience. Let me just apologize to our online audience. So we've seen that there have been issues with uploading the slides. We will do that on the Eventbrite page as soon as the session is over so that we can access that. Apologies for that. Questions? Or are we still, okay, ruminating? No, I think for the online audience, we need the mic. If you can just tell us your name and where you're coming from, and then you can ask your question. Thank you.
When that happens, not only the white people, but also people of color, especially male people of color, they tend to ignore us and they tend to acknowledge the white people. So that happens to me several times. So that's one question. Sorry on this. The other one is...
Just breathe in and breathe out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. And the other one is you talked about justice, transforming communities through justice. I know this is a big question. How would you bring climate justice into this conversation? And, you know, you talked about ecosystem and also about the concept of into. So how do you bring the conversation about climate justice into this conversation, if you can answer that? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm trying to capture what you're saying in dealing with the silences, being silenced or being erased. How do I deal with that? Did I capture that correctly? In short, I have, in such a way also, we talk about critical mass. I ended up being a union leader because I decided being silent is not going to change anything. I'd rather be raising my voice, rather be called an angry black woman, which I have been called in so many times. And remember, when they begin to give you labels, they are trying to shame you. They are trying to also silence you. So you decide whether you want to be silenced or not. It's a bigger battle. It's a bigger fight. But Crenshaw also talk about intergroup. I think in most cases we talk about intergroup oppressions, but we rarely talk about intra-group oppressions. Because also within an intra-group, within us as BMEs, we also oppress each other because of our social identities, because of our social hierarchy. Some are at a higher level than others. One of the defining factors is class. I think, Prof, you also spoke about the qualification, the university where you got the qualification, because we also know we have A-ranked universities and those that I don't know whether we still call them as ranked. There are politics also of ranking. I'm not here to talk about the politics of ranking. But importantly, how we see you, it's because you were at Leeds. So we recognize you. But there's someone who comes from another university and they're not recognized because of where they're coming from. There are many battles that you are going to fight. Make no mistake of that. Importantly, choose your battle. Know which battles are worth fighting. Know whether this battle is going to be won or not. Realize also that, are you willing to carry the mental labor that comes with remaining in that particular system? And I always say in most cases, you have to begin to choose you because you are replaceable. That's not irreplaceable. You are replaceable. The second question was it about climate? The issue of the organizational culture, the organizational climate, it's a very dynamic one. Somewhere along the line, I think systems need to change. We cannot continue with the system that oppress us and we assume that the same systems are going to bring change. But importantly, there's a role that is played by those that are at the helm of the leadership. It is important to echo zero tolerance within the university. And when you say zero tolerance, you walk the talk. If you do not walk the talk, that actually means you are enabling the system to be oppressive on those that you are trying to attract. And hence it is important to create these communities where you can actually find a space, a safe space to talk about your experiences. I found also doing these interviews for my research, some people said, you know what? After this interview, I actually feel a bit lighter because I had someone to talk to. Sometimes it's not about changing the world, but having someone who can listen to you. Unfortunately, in these spaces, we do not have those who can listen to us. Because also, those who appear to be willing to listen to us, they listen with an intention of using that information to up their game within the system. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's not really a question. I don't know if we're allowed to make like comments on all the speakers before yours. It's a little, I just have something a bit that's I've been reminded of today. I really loved the presentation by the Vice Chancellor, thank you, Ma, and where she mentioned the different kind of biases that that people face. And as a Black woman who is doing research in the arts field, it's like, I don't know if I would say it's a double or triple bias because, for instance, there was this beautiful picture she put up in her slide of a Black woman doing research. And we could see that it was research in a science lab. Most times when research is talked about, it's like more prominence is given to the science field. But there are a lot of interesting researches being done in the arts and humanities. There are speech production labs, there are translation labs, there are beautiful arts and design. And like the PhD research you did, you conducted interviews, and those had like great societal impact. So there's a lot of great impact being made in the arts and humanities. But then we'll find that when there are, in our mind, it's like the unconscious bias. Whenever we talk about research, we think of a science lab. Is there a way to like change the narrative or bring to fore the interesting research being done, not just by the BMEs, but also in other fields of research that is not STEM? Thank you.
Thank you. Your question reminds me of the case of COVID-19, which was more science orientated. We're talking science, 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 science. And people from humanities said, pause. There is a human science issues that we need to begin to unpack about what is happening with COVID. And I think the VC also echoed, it's important to have an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary research that we need to be doing. And I think, you want to make a comment? Oh, okay.
Thank you for your question. And I think it's one of the many systems changes that we need. And I completely agree, transdisciplinarity is where we need to go, where we actually invent new research and think about things really differently by bringing STEM researchers together with arts, humanities, culture, social sciences, because none of these issues are siloed and simple. If we'd reinvent the university, I don't think we'd have 7 different faculties, but it's so ingrained globally, I think it's really hard to move beyond that. But in Leeds, we're going to start centers. We're going to call them Futures Institutes, where scholars from all the 7 faculties come together around these big themes. And I think that's going to be a place where also early career researchers can really bring their passion to the fore, and where we can move beyond the schools and faculties. But it's part of that systems change we need, and it's part of everything. So I think it's a really, really great question.
Thank you. I think I'm not going to elaborate on that. I think one important thing also about research is that research is driven by funds. And funds normally are driving science more than the humanities. So we need to begin from the human sciences to actually be the voice. And it is through these communities. When you're doing things in your little corner, no one will know. But if we unify, in fact, I was asking my colleague, in Africa, I think you had one picture of the woman that was carrying water. And sometimes we ask, how do they do it? There's something that we call ingata. So it's a soft cloth that is interwoven that actually helps to carry the baggage. So, which is also the weight. So working together in order to be able to carry the baggage. United we can stand. But if we are going to work in the corner, it is important to, when we talk about research, it's also about who do we cite? Because the citation also informs the promotion. And if we don't collaborate, if we don't have a resource point that is central to know that Kay has actually produced this particular paper, and begin to bring that into the conversation. So there's a bigger agenda that needs to be done. As we look into the research, I think it's a bigger topic that we need to explore to say, how do we begin to engage into research? Because we also know there are gatekeepers when we talk about research publishing. Who is the editor? Does it determine whether your gets published or not? Is your research qualified as worthy or not worthy? And these research that are not identified as niche trajectory of our globe. With that said, thank you. I saw there was a hand here. Do we have an opportunity or are we closing?
I have some questions from the people attending online. The first one is from Sandra.
Wounded people. We need to have spaces to talk. We need to have spaces to unpack what we are carrying. Until we have those spaces, we'll continue. And I was saying also to my colleague, had people had other people. And that's the sad reality. I hope that covers the point online. Thank you.
Just one question here. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Iman Federico. I'm a teacher of criminology and law, and also I'll be embarking on research looking at the barriers to education that Black students face in HE. And I also work with RARA organisation supporting Africans and Caribbeans. But my question specifically was just the point that you made that really resonated with me about, especially as a young Black woman in academia, the idea that you feel that you have to remain submissive, especially to
So it might not be the best strategy, but it's just about choosing your battles, because those against you are people like you. So how do you navigate through it, really fighting it directly? So what I've done is just walk away and go somewhere else, and where I would be better seen. So, and that's what I did, and it worked.
There's another hand. I think it's an input. It's not a question. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gogo from the University of Leeds here. Thank you for the brilliant representation. For me, in respect of what the last question is, keep being who you are. Number two, those who are not allies, also find a way to support them in a way. And I give you an example. Something happened when I was in the bank. I started a union in an international bank, and the auditors in the department are the people who actually determine the careers of people in terms of investigation. So the chief investigator had a problem. And because I'm representing employees, and I had to speak on his behalf to say, he's a human being, he could make a mistake. And when that happened, his mentality changed forever, and he became an ally. So the point is, yes, there are people who may not be your ally, but if you keep being who you are, irrespective of the fact that they are not your ally, that could change them from becoming your ally. For me, that's what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. We're closing it.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to, my name is Ayomide, and I'm a first-year PhD student at John Innes Center, Norwich. And I just wanted to talk about people not having allies with people that look like you, people that you would expect to be on your side. And I think it still comes from the fact that those people have had to develop a survival strategy in that space. And they've had to associate with, they've had to lose themselves, lose their identity just for them to survive in that space, because they didn't have people like them to also look up to. So when you come in, it's probably not because they don't want to associate with you, but the moment they begin to move close to you, they lose the support of, the community they've had to associate with just to survive in that space. So, which is why I still think that what we're doing, changing the narrative, building communities that allow people to find a sense of belonging, gradually we get to a point where people know it's okay to be themselves. It's okay to associate with their identity. It's okay not to lose themselves just because they want to survive in that space. So putting all the advices of people and their experiences, I think we should not expect that things to just change at once. Yes, we should understand that it will take a gradual process, but be the change you want to see, keep being good, keep being positive, speak to people who are willing to listen, whether it's outside our space or not, and just do what you can. But I think just understanding where those people are coming from, it's really important to see why this is really needed and why this community is really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to close, thank you very much for your input. I always say it's always good to bring it back to the people because we all have experiences. When we come here, we are not sponges. We have something that we can give back into this community. But I also want to echo the importance of mentorship, coming back to the questions that have been raised. When you mentor people, it's not just giving back your time, but it also helps in building your tribe. Remember that. Because once I have mentored, someone becomes indebted for the support that I've provided. And they're likely, not always, they are likely also to work with you because you have worked with them. So sometimes you need to pay it forward before you can actually get it back to you. Thank you very much.